Great. Well, hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Uh, you'll see a trivia question up here, but we'll get to that. But I'm actually going to go back to the start of the slide of our presentation. Um, I so my name is Dr. Trina Bryan. I'm so excited. Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Someone was muting themselves.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be able to share to co-present with Dr. Marsh, who is just an amazing scholar. And I had an opportunity to connect with her at the 11th Doctoral Network Conference in Atlanta this past October. And we talked about many things, but we got a chance to really talk about the importance for us around travel, around exploration, and the amazing opportunity that the Fulbright can provide scholars. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and part of this will be, again, very, very much informational, kind of heavy at the beginning on information, but we're going to spend some time also talking about our individual experiences. And for me, when I think about Fulbright and when I actually think about travel, I think it is not just about scholarship. It's not just about professional development. It is not just about, again, adding things to your resume, which is all great things. But for me, it's really about well-being and also making connections. And I think that's really important. And that's kind of the why for me around not just the Fulbright, but again, global exploration and encouraging everyone, especially diverse communities, to take advantage of opportunities out there to travel, to meet people, and to grow as an individual, and to bring stuff back to whatever community you find yourself in. So just a quick note about the agenda. We have a few slides that we're going to go through, but the main focus are these kind of four areas. We want to talk about and I want to say that there's so much information about these two programs, so we are just touching the surface. But we want to talk a little bit about the difference between these programs, so that you can take advantage of it and see which one best works for you. We'll talk a little bit about the criteria. And I know perhaps Dr. Marsh and myself, we also have examples of our application, but we can talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about some of the post program deliverables. So there are things that you have to do after you get back from your exploration. And then we'll spend hopefully a majority of the time talking just about our experiences and answering questions about that. So if that's okay, please give me a thumbs up. Dr. Marsh, did you want to add anything to our intro?
No, I think that was wonderful. I do want to say welcome to everyone. I am so excited to be here. I do think that it's really important for people that look like me to be in a Fulbright or be in another country, understanding the culture and doing research and or teaching in another country. So when the opportunity arose that we could possibly come and have a conversation about it, I was like, absolutely, sign me up. So I appreciate Dr. Bryant for having me here. We've talked about it. We've both done Fulbrights, and we want to be able to expose as many people to the process, because sometimes you just need to demystify the process. It's like, oh my gosh, a Fulbright's going to be so hard to apply for. It's really not that hard. There's just some things that we want to kind of talk about what we did in hopes that it might be helpful for you today. But I do hope, to the point that Dr. Bryant made, is that I hope we can spend most of the time answering any questions you might possibly have to the best of our ability. And if we don't know the answer, we'll try to go find an answer and get an answer for you.
Excellent. Yes. So we're going to go back before we talk a little bit about what the Fulbright program is. A little trivia I had up. Does anyone have, for bragging rights and maybe a gift certificate someplace? I have to figure that out. But if you could tell me, does anyone have the answer to this question? Does anyone know? You could unmute yourself and say, you could put it in the chat. Let's see if I'm looking at the chat. Okay, give it another minute.
People are putting some answers in the chat.
Yep, I see someone says all of them. One says Dr. Angelo. I guess Maya for Ghana. Okay, any others? Let's see. Oh, okay, so some of them said, okay. So it's Miss Bury Ballard. You are correct. All of them.
Hooray! Thank you.
Yes, congratulations. So
Thanks.
anyway, briefly, I think Dr. Hope Franklin is perhaps he's the one on the far right when I'm looking at it. He has perhaps participated in the most. So he's done everything from Venezuela to UK to countries in Africa. Maya Angelou as well, and then also Dr. Harold Amos. And you can look up more about them, but they primarily, we're talking about a span from 1950 to the 80s. These individuals have participated in Fulbright and have taken all of the experiences that they've learned, they've added it to their particular focus and have shared it. So if you want to learn a little bit more about them, I would encourage you to do that. There are many, many more, but amazing scholars who participated and have enhanced the Fulbright experience for many. All right, so just a very quick overview. And as I mentioned, there's so much information, so I'm going to try to breeze through some of these slides. It's more heavy on the information, but then again, we'll spend some time talking about our experiences. So to be quite frank, there's sometimes this misunderstanding about the Fulbright and the Fulbright-Hays. There are some distinct differences, but I will say in general, the best way to think about both of these programs is that technically the Fulbright, you could say, is more of the overview, right? It's the umbrella. And so there are many programs under Fulbright. Fulbright-Hays is one of them. However, the beginnings of Fulbright really started with William Fulbright, Senator Fulbright. And we'll talk a little bit about him and some of the controversies around that. That was 1946, and that comes right after obviously World War II. And so there's this push to really create an opportunity to hopefully avoid that type of war and to create this process where people are exchanging ideas and really encouraging each other and building collaborations. And it's more outward focused. Fulbright-Hays comes along a couple of years later, 1961. Representative Hayes, Senator Fulbright, they propose something again. And the Fulbright-Hays has primarily been around curriculum and in the classroom. How can we take what we've experienced abroad? How can we exchange ideas and bring it back to the classroom? The Fulbright program itself, like the Fulbright U.S. Scholar, and again, there's multiple programs. So when I'm talking about Fulbright, we'll talk a little bit about primarily that scholarship program. That tends to be a longer duration. So you're talking about 9 to 12 months, most likely. For Fulbright-Hays, because it's primarily for a lot of practitioners, secondary ed as well as higher ed, but it's a shorter period of time. And so those are things that you might want to be thinking about as you are thinking about what you want to do. And we'll talk a little bit more about the funding structure, but I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about this because it's not necessarily the purpose, but I wanted to highlight the purpose, the mission of Fulbright, but also touch upon the controversy, which has been, I think, many scholars have been highlighting some concerns around, I would say, Senator Fulbright's his goal around the Fulbright program, but also his apparent inconsistency in how he, voted and acted during his lifetime. So I'm not going to read as I said, I'm not going to read everything, but the main goal when you think about Fulbright is this idea of increasing knowledge, promoting collaboration, and cultivating that network. And the goal is that by doing this, we are not only creating an exchange of ideas between scholars, but we're creating an opportunity where we can see each other's value and we can work towards something, right? So that's great. And I believe that in many ways, Fulbright has done that. But as I mentioned before, over the last, I would say 3 or 5 years, people are digging a little bit deeper and thinking about what Senator Fulbright, how he contributed to this program, but also some of the other things that he left behind. I believe last year, his alma mater, University of Arkansas, many students were petitioning for his statue to be taken down because, again, as I said, while he espoused these ideas, he oftentimes, according to scholars, supported segregation and did not support civil rights legislation. So not necessarily the point of this conversation, but I do want you to be aware how it relates to Fulbright is a couple of things. Because of a lot of the work that's being done and scholars are digging more deeper into his life and some of the things he contributed to, some would argue that Fulbright, when they celebrated their I think it's 76th or 75th year anniversary, you'll notice that they're starting to, in some circles, will start to kind of move away from the senator. They'll talk more about the goal and not necessarily his life. But in addition to that, they've been also trying to push us, at least when starting in 2019, to increase diversity. And to look at inclusion, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And so as you're thinking about how you want to participate, how you want to get involved, there are so many ways to do that. And I do want to point out that the three things that they've been working on since 2019 is really kind of increasing the increasing collaboration between Fulbright and HBCUs institutions, as well as HSIs. They've been also working to increase accessibility so that everyone can participate in a Fulbright. And they're also building partnerships. So like the Thurgood Marshall Scholarship Program, Thurgood Marshall College Fund, Benjamin Gilman International Scholarship Program. So there's a ton of programs and a ton of opportunities for you to not only get involved, but also to think about how you want to kind of organize your research or think about what you want to do with your research as it pertains to Fulbright if you are going to participate. I'm going to pause. Any questions? Feel free to dump questions in the chat. I'll try to monitor that. So as I mentioned, there are so many programs within the Fulbright. We're going to focus on the ones that we have experience with. But as you're thinking about what program you want to do or how you want to get involved, and in addition to thinking about Fulbright, the focus of Fulbright now, which is again focusing on DEI, you want to be thinking about where you are in your career. So there's a Fulbright U.S. student program. There's programs for scholars, and I'm not going to go through the whole list, but as you can see here, there are for secondary teachers as well, and then industry professionals. And so there's so many opportunities to do that, so many opportunities to think about how you want to enhance your career, but also perhaps take a problem, explore a solution, and enhance your experience within a community, and position yourself as an expert. And we'll talk again a little bit in a few minutes about how Dr. Marsh and myself, we did that with our program. But as I mentioned, the two programs that we're going to focus on, or that we will talk more about our experiences with the U.S. program, the scholarship program, as well as the Fulbright-Hays program. And the Fulbright-Hays program, as I said, there's so many programs within these programs. So you have Fulbright, then you have the Fulbright-Hays, which is a program of a Fulbright, but then under Fulbright-Hays, you have these different programs. And so you have to think about which program makes sense for you. My area of focus has been on the seminar abroad, mainly because, and I'll talk a little bit about it, they tend to be a little bit shorter. And many of I would say the experiences, the protocols, everything is really laid out. So it's very structured and it's very short. Now, for example, the doctoral dissertation research abroad, similar to the U.S. Scholar Program, the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program, that is a longer. There's an opportunity for you you're creating some of the itinerary. You're thinking through more of the details of that. And again, a longer experience. With the group project, which I think is great, and that's going to be my next, I'm going to try to explore that opportunity next. You get to work, let's say you have a group, your department or your division, you want to explore an issue, you have an opportunity to write a proposal for a group of your colleagues to travel and to explore. And again, you have more control over the itinerary and what you want to do. But for me, again, with my schedule and my life, and those are things that you have to think about, I chose a seminar because, again, a little bit more structured, a little bit shorter, and again, more concise. So those are the kind of differences. But again, so you have the Fulbright, and then the Fulbright-Hays, the program under the Fulbright, and then under the Fulbright program, Hays program, there are other programs. So it can get kind of a little wonky there. Let me pause and see. Are there any questions? Yes, you will have access to slides. And I'm going to try to review the questions as I come in. So if I don't get to them, we'll have a moment where we pause and we're talking about experiences, and we will try to respond. Okay, so the last couple slides, and then we'll talk about our experiences. And as I said, I am just skimming the surface, and we can talk more, we can go in depth around this, but I just want to give you, as Dr. Marsh said, I want to demystify the application process and also what these programs are. So you'll notice, and I'm gonna toggle between this and the next slide, which I'll show you. So you'll notice the Fulbright-Hays slide. You'll notice that it seems a little less dense, which we'll talk about, and where if you go back to the Fulbright application component, there's a lot more to it. However, there may be a lot of components, but it's when you think about the work that you do, whether it's in education or whether you're an industry professional, what they're asking for is actually something you probably would do applying to other things. And so I think sometimes when people look at this list, they're like, oh my gosh, it's a lot, but it's really not. Part of the statement, and Dr. Marsh can talk a little bit about her experience in applying to this through the application process, is really talking about, I think the biggest thing that the committee that's going to look at your application wants to know is, like, what is the purpose and what is the potential impact? So if you are applying for the U.S. Scholar Program, Fulbright program, they want to know what are you interested in doing? What is the impact? What is your why? And then what are some things that you hope to ultimately do with this, and how are you going to do it? So there's a lot of opportunity, especially when you go to this program, or even the doctoral dissertation program, where you can again really map out what you want your experience to be based on what you're going to be doing. And then of course there's other factors depending on what you're doing. So maybe you're focusing on a particular topic for research, or maybe you're focusing on a particular topic as it pertains to education. And in that case, you'll need different components. So if you're going from the teacher perspective, you might need a sample syllabus. If you're going from project perspective, you might need something else. But generally, I would say these are the components. Dr. Marsh, do you want to talk a little bit about your application experience, or have anything to add?
Unmute yes, as soon as I can find my unmute button. So I did the research one of the Fulbrights, and I was in South Africa, I believe, for 11 months. I was almost there for an entire year. And I'm not trying to brag or anything of that nature, but the Fulbright office actually called me when I submitted my application, and they said, thank you for my application. And the reason why they said thank you is because I clearly laid out exactly what I was going to do when I stepped foot in South Africa. I met with people and talked with people. I had people write me a sponsor letter saying that they would help me while I'm there. I knew where my office was going to be. It was going to be on the 3rd floor, into the hall. So I had everything already in motion by the time I got there. Because the Fulbright is kind of like, okay, we want to be able to give Fulbrights, but we don't want you to spend the first 3 months or the first 6 months trying to figure out who you're going to work with, what the research project is. If you have a good idea, and you have built an infrastructure before you even get to the country or place that you're trying to go to, it really does make the Fulbright feel much more comfortable saying and confident that you'll be able to get the work done that you say that you're going to get done in your application. But 2 things I also want to add to that. This is a side note, because I did not know, not even until I got a Fulbright. The Fulbright only has 1 L in it. I was spelling it Fullbright. So in case y'all don't know, please don't apply for the application with 2 L's in your application, like I did. Second, one of the things that I really appreciated about the Fulbright, we had to do a security briefing before we went to South Africa. Every country you have to do that. And one of the things they said, we appreciate the applications. All of you wrote beautiful applications, but I want you to think about possibly getting a third of the things done that you actually want to get done. You will not get everything done in your application that you want to get done. And I appreciated them so much, because there is a startup cost. You're going to another country. You want to be respectful of the culture there. So what the Fulbright said during our security briefing, you're only going to get about 33% of it done. Your main goal and objective is to present the US well, be respectful of the culture, and start out on the research project and try to get as much of it done as you can get done. And that really took a lot of the load off for me when I realized I was only going to be there for a year, because I was able to really enjoy the culture too, and not just work from sun up to sundown while I was in South Africa.
No, absolutely. Yes. Make sure the one L, but yes. I think the I would say one of the things that I was told, and I'll talk a little bit about the Fulbright-Hays actually. Let me jump to that. And we'll toggle back and forth. But for the Fulbright-Hays, again, it's a shorter period of time, but they are really interested as well. Again, why? What is your why? And what are ways that you are going to use this information? For the Fulbright-Hays, primarily you are focusing on creating a curriculum project. Because again, remember the Fulbright-Hays is mainly for, again, practitioners, people in the classroom, or people, maybe if you're an administrator, you oversee the classroom. So they're looking for how is this going to reach and impact the classroom experience. And so you don't have to have every single thing figured out, obviously, because you're going to this particular country to learn and explore and to engage with other scholars. But they want to have an idea that at least you've done perhaps some initial research and you've thought about potentially who you might want to connect with. Again, I think more of the difference with the Fulbright-Hays versus the Fulbright scholarship program is that the Fulbright-Hays, you can brainstorm and think about different individuals you might want to connect with, but for the most part, again, the program is really structured and contained. So the Fulbright-Hays group has already kind of mapped out some of the people you're going to talk to. They reach out to you once you get accepted. There is kind of a pre-departure, and they reach out to you and they may ask you, are there, based on your research, based on what you've done, are there individuals you would like to speak to? And they will try to make sure they're part of the program. But again, they are primarily, it is again more contained. Whereas I'm assuming Dr. Marsh had to think about, I want to connect with them, I need to reach out to person. But again, both of them are programs, both of them are opportunities, and I think it's great to explore. But so for me, it was more of a curriculum project. So I did want to point out, going back to the Fulbright application component, and as I said, we're focusing on a snippet. There are some other perhaps nuances if you're someone from another country applying to either come here or go someplace else. There are other things, but this is again very general. So the cycle for the next application process will start in April 2024. So these are things that you can actually start working on now. For the Fulbright-Hays, their application is actually due sooner. That is January 4th, which is also one of the reasons why I was interested in doing this. But as you'll notice, again, it's still some work, but it's a little bit less, I would say there's a little bit less required. So if that's something you're interested in, I think the main thing for me that was really helpful for me is I thought about not only the population that I serve. I'm in my current role, I help design curriculum on the curriculum committee. I am in higher ed, but I work with education majors and just different groups of individuals, as well as first-year students, and just a diverse community that our school is located in. So I thought about all of those things as I thought about my application. So as you're thinking, and we'll talk about some of those questions you need to be asking if you are interested in preparing your application and looking for, these are things that you want to be thinking about. What is your work? What is your goal? What is your purpose? What is your why? What is the community that you serve? And how can you utilize that to enhance your application? Okay. And again, you'll notice that for the U.S. Fulbright, one of those stipulations or requirements or eligibility is that you do have an advanced degree. And so for the Fulbright-Hays, again, because it's a little bit broader, but more contained in terms of what they're doing, but it's primarily for practitioners and the classroom. There are, again, various individuals who can apply to the Fulbright-Hays application. I'm going to pause here for a moment. All right, so so we have one more slide and then we'll talk about jumped ahead. One more slide and then we'll spend, again, most of our time. We'll pause just for a moment for some questions, but I would love Dr. Marsh to talk a little bit more extensively about her experience and some of the things that she has been able to do with her scholarship there. So this is, again, very basic. And perhaps Dr. Marsh, you can speak a little bit more into this, but when you think about both programs, there are some, I know Dr. Marsh mentioned the startup costs. There are certain expenses that you do need to think about, but for the most part, things are covered. So from my experience from the Fulbright-Hays, for example, we're not paid flight, hotel, food, visits to museums, to cultural experiences, completely covered. However, they do ask you to make sure that you have set aside a few $100s for, again, extra insurance, for inoculations if necessary, if you need to update your passport. Those are things that you should be prepared for. I will say, so I did two Fulbright Hays programs, one to Mexico before COVID, and then one to Taiwan. I'll talk a little bit more about that post COVID. And for the both trips, while there was again some out of pocket expense, I would say that part of the financial, I guess, piece to this is that you are given a stipend. For Mexico, we were given a stipend ahead of time, which again was a few $100s to make sure we were able to take care of things, and that for the most part was able to take care of the cost. For Taiwan, we were given a stipend once in country, and that stipend for the most part was almost equal to how much I had to pay for whatever I had to pay for up before in preparation. And so I would say that I know when people hear, oh, a few $100s, I would not let that stop you. Again, there are certain structures that are built in. And again, when we got the stipend in countries, some people utilized that to do what they needed to do. Other people kept it and said, oh, this will cover the cost of some of the expenses where I had to update my passport or what have you. So the funding structure, again, depending on what you're going to be doing, is a little bit different. But Dr. Marsh, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with funding this project? I know most of it was most likely funded, but
Yes, okay, so I have to be honest. I did my Fulbright in 2017, and I probably applied in 2016. So the memory gets a little hazy after the age of 50. So I'm going to do the best that I can. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it was kind of odd because I believe the Fulbright asked to see your checking account and your savings account. They wanted to see like how much money you had in your accounts to make sure that you were safe. What I don't remember, it was either the Fulbright or was where I was gonna live. I can't remember, but I believe it was a Fulbright because they wanted to make sure if anything happened, if you had enough money to sustain yourself, if you had to get back to the States. And I was like, so yes, I was like untenured, and I was newly tenured professor. So I was borrowing money from all kinds of people to put in my account to make it look like I had money in case something happened. Again, I don't know if that was the Fulbright or if that was the place that I was actually staying, but I do believe it was the Fulbright. They wanted to see my banking information and make sure I had some money. And I also remember we got three payments over the year. We got a big chunk at the beginning of the Fulbright before I went to South Africa. And I was responsible for getting my own airline ticket. I was responsible for getting my own lodging. I was responsible for shipping anything that I wanted to ship. So that first check was really, really, really big. Then that second check came about midway through my time there, and it was much smaller. And then that third check came towards the end. And what's interesting, and I did not know this when I was on my Fulbright, but you're basically working in another country. And so you have like this standard kind of work schedule where you get 2 weeks off throughout the year and da 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 da. So I had 17 house guests that came to visit me during my time in South Africa. Friends and family wanted to come visit me. So we would tour Southern Africa. So we went to Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana. And so I was in and out of the country. So the Fulbright office called me and said, hey, listen, you're working and you only get 10 days to be out. And I came home to the US one of those at 1 month. I think it was around graduation. And so they're like, if you're gone more than 10 days, we can deduct that from your final paycheck. And the way in which they could figure that out is like my passport would be stamped when I was coming in and out of the country. So they expect you to be there. They want you to be there. If you're taking the full Fulbright, the whole year one, they expect you to be there. They want you to be there. And if you do decide that you're not going to be there for 10 days, it can affect your money in the long run.
That is good to know.
Yes, I did not know that until I got there. I was like, all my friends and family, I was like, you got to go on these safaris by yourself because I'm getting all my money, all my loot.
Yeah, and I guess it would make sense. So you're not, people just would get a Fulbright. I'm like, I'm just exploring, doing my thing. Yeah,
right. But then but I am happy for the experience. So one of the things that I talked about doing in my application is that I wanted to write a book about people that were black and middle class in the South African context, because in spite of it all, there is a thriving Black middle class in South Africa. And so I wrote a book I collected data. I interviewed over 90 people when I was in South Africa. Again, I had some of those interviews set up before I even left the States. As soon as I hit the ground, I was like, let's do this. So with those interviews, I actually wrote a book with my South African collaborators looking at it's kind of like a methodological book. It's a really short book. And it just talks about the different perspectives, being an Black American scholar versus like a Black South African scholar and graduate students, like trying to like navigate our own identities as we try to do this research project. So that's kind of a methodological piece. We also have a book proposal under review, still under review for years, with a South African publisher about the data that we collected, looking at the Black middle class in South Africa. And one of the things that was really important to me is that I could have gone to South Africa for that year, got over 90 interviews, met some wonderful colleagues, and then come back to the States and written in a book about the South African middle class experience from an American publisher like NYU or Princeton or something like that. But for me, getting back to the point of what the Fulbright said when we had our security briefing, they said, be sensitive and respect the culture. I thought that would be very exploitive if I were to come back to America and publish a book in America. I do think publishing a book in South Africa is what means the most to me. I do think that Americans can get access to it, but it's much harder for South Africans to get access to American books than it is for us to get access to South African books. So we tentatively have a book proposal with KwaZulu-Natal Press. And if it doesn't work out there, I'm going to find another press in South Africa because it's really important to me. So I do think that as you think about the Fulbright and you think about doing any of these options, I want you to think about, well, again, what is your overall goal? And is that goal going to have that country in mind whenever you get back to the States? That's something that's really thoughtful that you really should think through a little bit.
Excellent. Excellent. No, yes, absolutely. Which actually is a perfect transition into the post-program deliverables. Again, I will say for the Fulbright, because the Fulbright-Hays rather, because it is a shorter time and it's very tightly structured. I didn't have to think about spending additional money other than, again, renewing my passport, if I needed to, getting inoculations and stuff like that. So it's very tight. And again, generally for a month, it might be like a month and a week because there's a pre-departure. And I know someone had asked for us to explain more about the Fulbright-Hays, and I will talk about that. We're gonna go into sharing more about our experiences, and I'll talk a little bit about everything from application to pre-departure and what it meant. But as I said, most Fulbright-Hays programs, because they are for the practitioners, they are happening in summer, generally like after commencement. So for the summer, when I went to Taiwan, I actually wrapped commencement and I started doing some research. I think the end of May, there was a pre-departure week. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then by June we were off, and then we came back, and then I came back the first week of July. So again, very tightly structured, housing, everything. You don't have to think about anything, and it's paid for. The only thing you have to think about is like, what do you want your curriculum project to be? And when we talk about deliverables, again, there's with the Fulbright-Hays, it's very much prescribed. Like this is what you have to do. They use understanding by design, a template. You get a template. This is it. That is what you're required to do. I think for the U.S. Fulbright Scholars Program and for other programs, you have an opportunity to create, which is, again, awesome, but it can also be daunting because while they say, hey, it needs to fit into something like this, it's broader. Whereas Fulbright-Hays, it's like, it needs to fit into this, and that's it. And you need to turn it in at a certain time. You need to do X, Y, and Z. So the deliverables, as you're thinking about what you want to do, and again, your why, that will help you figure out which program makes more sense for you, but also it will help you as you prepare for your application. I will say that in addition to the deliverables of like producing a product or of something, many, at least for the Fulbright-Hays, we're encouraged to also share our story. So this will be an example of me, this right now, us sharing our story. I also shared a story with my cohort members. We did another presentation. The goal is to, again, expand the knowledge of Fulbright. And as I mentioned, going back to that slide where we talked about the Fulbright commitment to DEIA, there is a push to also, again, make sure that we are being inclusive and that we are encouraging individuals from diverse communities, or as Dr. Marsh said, people who look like us, to participate in these programs. So those are some of those deliverables. So as I said, I wanted to spend some time. Well, actually, let me pause here and let me see. I think I lost track of. I don't know where I put my the questions. Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna try to go back up so I can remember. It will be helpful for you in the future if you could, yes, we will try to read questions. I did answer the question. We will have yes, we'll provide access. Can you please elaborate on the seminars? I'll talk, as I said, I'll talk a little bit more in the next slide, when the next couple slides. So let me know what information you're looking more for. But as I mentioned, I think the biggest thing that I would take away from a Fulbright is that if you are someone that you do not have the capacity to go away for more than a month, then the Fulbright is perhaps for you. If you're looking for something where, again, you want to get especially if maybe you're someone who hasn't done a lot of travel or you're new to Fulbright, then it is I think personally, it is also a nice introduction because, again, it's very, very much structured, which if you're someone that wants to kind of explore, do other things and not be in a tight itinerary, then it might not be for you. So for the Taiwan trip, our itinerary was very tight. It was like we had a couple of free days where we could go off, but for the most part, it is very structured. And again, which could take some pressure off of you. They usually do at least three for the Fulbright-Hays seminars. They usually do kind of three areas, three foci. One is elementary teachers. Then one, I believe, is secondary. Is kind of middle school, high school, and then the other one is for anyone but primarily focused on administrators and higher ed. And so for this year, I believe for the higher ed one, they're going to Colombia. And so if that's your interest, then so again, they usually do three focus areas every year. And it's, in terms of the financial piece, as I said before, you're really only looking at things that you have to do in preparation. You're not necessarily focusing on things in country. So I hope that helps you a little bit more. But as I said, I'll talk a little bit more about my experience. Going through the question now. Is there a financial amount granted to you, or does the applicant write the budget? I think that may be for you, Dr. Marsh.
Yes, and I was trying to remember. If I remember correctly, the budget is set for you, or the amount is set for you. Now, what you can do is maybe it's almost like a checklist. Like, what do you need? Do you need like daycare for children? Do you need like schooling? Do you need this, and this? And I often laugh at people, and I'm like, okay, it's just me. I wrote a whole book about being single and living alone with Black middle class. And I think in some ways I might have been a cheap candidate because I didn't have like children and stuff like that. So given the stuff that I checked off, they're like, okay, here's the set amount based on like the cost of living in the US and South Africa that you can get. So there's really, you can't say like, oh, I need like $3 million. It really is kind of set in some ways for you. But they do take into consideration like what all like needs you have when they set that budget for you.
And I did some, because again, my focus has mainly been on the Fulbright-Hays, but in doing some research for this, I noticed that on some of the informational, they'll list like a range. So for the doctoral dissertation Fulbright, or for the U.S. Scholar Fulbright, especially for the long ones, you could be looking at 130 to 300,000. How that's broken down, I'm assuming that involves living, transportation, and the like. But I noticed that they had these ranges, so I don't know if that will help you kind of think about what's available. All right, I think we have. All right, so that's all I see for questions right now. And let's go on to the next slide. Well, so we get to talk more about our experience. So, Dr. Marsh, I know you've already talked a little bit about it, but I would love to hear more and let the audience hear more about your experience in South Africa. Why South Africa? Why this particular Fulbright program? What was the process like, and what was your ultimate impact? We know that you're publishing a book because you're amazing, but what other things are you doing?
So let me tell you, I honestly did not know that professors could actually get a Fulbright. I don't know if it's good or bad, but I've written multiple letters for my graduate and even I think undergraduate students trying to get Fulbrights, and none of them got Fulbrights. And I was talking to my dean, who's moved on now. I think they're a president somewhere. And I was saying that I wanted to expand my research, because my research focuses on the Black middle class in the US context, but I wanted to expand my reach. And he's like, have you thought about a Fulbright? And I was like, no, because professors can't do Fulbrights. He's like, oh, contraire, you absolutely can do a Fulbright. And I was excited. I probably went home and wrote my application, or at least the first draft of my application that night or that whole weekend, because I didn't know that I could go. I really wanted to go. And I really wanted to do research that looked at this South Africa in a different context. When we think about South Africa, especially in the US context, we often think about famine, HIV, and apartheid. But in spite of all of that, there is a thriving Black middle class in South Africa. And so I really wanted to make sure and write about that. So when I got there, one of the things I had to grapple with is that I had American privilege. So being an American in South Africa, and I had an accent, and this shows my ignorance. So they kept saying, oh, we just love your accent. And I was like, what accent? I don't have an accent. And I was like, wow, that just shows my American privilege. And I had to be really careful not to use my American privilege. I remember it was one Sunday, I think it was Easter Sunday, and I wanted to go to church. I had joined this church, and there was a really long line to get in. And so the person that was driving me to church was like, oh, we have an American in the car. They got out of line and went to the front of the line and said, there's an American in the car. And they let me right in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt so bad and so guilty in church. And I repented all day in church. Who was only English speaking. And so I felt really, really bad. And I said, you know what, I'm going to use this once and only once, and I'm not going to allow this to happen again. In South Africa, they do have 13 different dialects, and I tried to learn them. My little friends that were teaching me, they would laugh at me because of my American dialect. But I wanted to be sensitive to the culture. So I wanted to learn as much of the different dialects as I could in South Africa. But the experience was, this is why I'm here on a Friday in my office, fighting a little bit of a cold, to be here to talk to you all, because it was such a wonderful experience. It made me a much better scholar. And I met some of the most beautiful people on the planet. I mean, the people in South Africa truly are the salt of the earth. And every time I go home, every time I go back to South Africa, they always say to me, welcome home. And I'm like, yes, I appreciate that so very much. But I think it's really important for you to think about what you're going to, again, so what your project's going to be, and what are you going to leave in South Africa with, or in your country, wherever your country is. And that's something that you really shouldn't take lightly. And it should not just be about a research experience or a teaching experience for you. It should be a broader experience too, to broaden your understanding of, like, whatever your discipline is. Think about how you should and could draw from scholars in the area, and think about how your teaching should have a global feel. I think in America, we often just think about things from the US perspective, and we think like we're the world power, we have all the knowledge. But in other countries, they're doing really great research, but it's just not as highlighted as much. So I would argue that wherever we go, we are champions for the people and the scholars in the area that we're going to make sure that we do highlight them when we come back to the US. But the experience was great. In fact, once my book came out, a lot of my friends in South Africa were like, please come and do a book talk. And I did 9 book talks in South Africa. I went back and did 9 book talks. And I think 4 of those were actually at universities that I associated with when I was there. So I have some of my dearest friends that are in South Africa, and I try to get there as often as I can. I'm also in a space where I'm trying to get my undergraduates and graduate students to think about going to other countries to get their PhDs, to get a year of research experience or whatever in another country, because it does just broaden your perspective. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway message for me is like how I wanted to contribute to the country, and how it changed and shifted my thinking as a scholar, spending a year in a place with some other people and learning from them and a new culture. And I love the culture and try to get back as often as I can. There were 2 questions in the chat. I'm not sure if they were for me or not.
Well, maybe you could speak to this. I could speak to this a little bit. So can you all speak to navigating language barriers as someone who is only English speaking?
Right. So in South Africa, English is one of the native language, one of the languages for the country. And they have 13 other languages as well. So for me, it really wasn't a problem because most people spoke English as well. But like I said, it really was important for me to also try to learn some of the local dialects because it shows that I really am trying to learn and I'm an open vessel to learn from another culture. And so for me, it wasn't much of an issue.
Right. So for the Fulbright-Hays, generally it is open. They do say, what I say open is that it's open for everyone. You do not need to have a certain language proficiency. There are certain programs that you might need to. So if you're doing your doctoral dissertation, something specific, especially research where maybe students are taking a survey, you need some of the information translated and you need to do a focus group, they might ask for you to show some level of proficiency. But again, it all depends on the program. So I think I would say with the longer programs like the doctoral dissertation program, like the U.S. scholarship program, Fulbright Scholar program, you have an opportunity to shape your experience. And so you could shape the experience so that maybe that's not a requirement for you. So I think it depends on, again, what program. And for different programs, there are certain requirements for that. But the two that we're focusing on, no. So when I went to Mexico, they did say, so the application process has a point system. And we might get a chance to talk a little bit more about that or might not. But when I showed you the requirements for the application, each application each component has a point system. So when we went to Mexico, it was not required that you spoke Spanish, but they gave an extra point for people who were bilingual because they wanted to make sure they had a diverse group again on this trip, but it was not required. For my trip to Taiwan, that wasn't required. Much like South Africa, because of Taiwan's education reform, they have really pushed English in schools. So you could be walking down the street, a middle schooler is speaking some level of some proficiency of English. However, one of the things, some of our presentations obviously were in Mandarin, and they were there was a translator there. And one of the things that I often try to do, I think, as Dr. Mars mentioned, I do try to learn some phrases. I think it's a great way of showing that you're really interested in learning. So when we visited the schools, there's ways that you say hello, there's ways that you ask for things. So I always try to learn. And I do have some experience. When I traveled to Brazil for an exchange program a long time ago, I did learn some Portuguese for that particular program because I thought it was really important to help me navigate. I would say that the Fulbright program and some of the information, they have information on that. But I could also talk to you later on about ways that you might want to kind of improve your particular language proficiency if you are interested. But again, for these two programs that we are specifically talking about, there are like 20 programs under Fulbright, but for these two programs, you don't have to necessarily show a proficiency in a particular language of the country that you're visiting. Let's see. There was one other question. How do you find out if there are other Fulbright scholars in place you aim to go? Excuse me. Yes. How do you find out? Excuse me. How do we find out if there are other Fulbright scholars in the places that we want to visit? That is actually a great question. Fulbright, as I mentioned before, especially as they're really pushing some of their things, some of their initiatives in 2019, I would say they've definitely expanded on their reach through social media and they have contacts. So each program. So when you go into the Fulbright, and I have a list of resources at the end of this presentation. When you click on, for example, if you go to like Fulbright program and you go to their website, they have all the different programs under the Fulbright program or under the Fulbright-Hays program. And then you click on it and then you'll see a whole range of like, why should you go? What are some great things about it? How can you connect with others? And so you can always connect through that way. Also, I've been working with, since I've done a couple Fulbrights, some of the individuals who are there in the office, in the administrative office, like Matt Robinson, he's always around and you could email him and say, hey, I would like to connect with someone before I go. Or are there certain partnerships, certain higher ed institutions, if you're doing the U.S. Scholar one, that Fulbright has a great relationship with, can I connect? So there are definitely ways to do that. And one of the things that I will say about both programs is that before you leave, or even if you're not even sure if you want to do an application, there's a ton of support and they will answer questions. And as I said, you can also find individuals on social media.
Yes, I just want to add on to that. Yeah, so the power of social media, it's like, you might want to use your social media like, hey, I'm coming to whatever country. I'm using South Africa as an example. Are there Fulbright scholars in the area? And they will reach out to you. Fulbright also has a really good network of the other Fulbright scholars who have been in the same country that you're going to or are currently there. And if they don't automatically connect you, you can ask them to connect you. And I'm sure they will have no problems doing that because they do keep track of all of us, even after we've left the program or even after we're not in the country. Because once a Fulbright scholar, always a Fulbright scholar. The other thing is that in any place any country that you go to, there's probably going to be a U.S. embassy, and you can always connect with the embassy there, and they can give you some U.S. people to connect with. Well, I was on my Fulbright, and mine was a longer Fulbright. The embassy had a lot of events for expats and for Americans that were in South Africa. And I was like, I didn't come to South Africa to hang out with Americans, but if you want to, you can, because the embassy is really good about reaching out and talking about different events that you can go to. So you will not be alone. You will have all kind of wraparound services or a whole network that is looking out for you and trying to give you resources before you go, once you get there, and even once you leave.
Absolutely. Actually, that's an excellent point for the Fulbright-Hays program. Part of, again, remember what I said, the structure is really tight. We are required to go to two, I would say, two like networking celebratory events, one at the beginning, one at the end. And so they tell you ahead of time, bring your cards, bring a Blink card, bring like your virtual card, because there's a great opportunity to connect with people once you're there. But then, especially during the pre-departure, and even if you have questions leading up to it, you can also connect with people. I know, so the second part to that question of how do you connect, Fulbright also keeps the list of different projects. As I said, they are really trying to expand and expose what Fulbright scholars are doing. And so when you go to some of the links that I have in the, excuse me, and I have at the end of the slide, you can click on and see what projects have been done. Also, as you're submitting a project or as you're looking for ideas, again, the people who are helping to administer, they can provide you some insight as to whether or not this particular focus has been done before. I know there's a question, is it fair to include how the individual applicant will utilize the opportunity or should one focus on discipline-specific impact? I think, again, it depends on the program. Do you want to talk to that, Dr. Marsh? So is it fair to include how the individual applicant will utilize the opportunity, or should one focus on discipline-specific impact?
I'm trying to remember on my application. On my application, I think I focused more so on the research, but focusing more so on the impacts from the research perspective. Also kind of tangentially talked about my own personal impacts and perspective. So I do think that in some kind of ways the crux of the application should be based on the impact of the discipline or discipline specific impact. But I do believe somewhere you should say that it will affect you individually. Again, because one of the things that the Fulbright wants to know is that you're going to represent them well. If you're just coming in there as the white savior, you're going to change these people, you're going to make them great. That's not necessarily what the Fulbright is looking for. For you to grow and you to grow the people around you is what they're looking for. So I would admonish you to definitely spend most of your time talking about the research, but also find a way in a paragraph or so talking about how it's going to individually affect you, impact you, and could change you as a scholar, as a researcher, or a teacher.
Yes, thank you. So I'm gonna just talk. I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I will. I'll talk a little bit about my Fulbright experience. A couple of the individuals who I was hoping would be able to join, they are traveling. One of my cohort members, she actually is in Taiwan now. She went back to do some more work. So she might not be able to share, but I'm gonna try to talk a little bit about. So, as I mentioned, I'm a huge fan of the Fulbright program for a long time. This is my second Fulbright-Hays. I'm looking to do another one. I actually met I don't have her in my picture, but I met a woman who, and I'm forgetting the school where she teaches, but she has done like 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a lot. And so when you look at the application process, I would say that one of the the things that they will ask you, have you participated in a program? And actually you get points for that. They're looking for, again, depending on which program they're doing. So one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Taiwan is for a couple of reasons. Number one, where the demographic that I serve is definitely becoming more diverse, and the area where my school is located, it makes sense that this would be an interesting area to explore as we begin to be more inclusive, reach out, and have more students on our campus from again very diverse backgrounds. I think also for me, what I was interested in is their two things: their work around um, um, their work around education reform. So as I mentioned before, over the last maybe decade or so, they've been looking at how can they really impact the school environment for students, and how they can prepare them, and just looking at how what that looks like, and how can that feed into what I'm doing and what I'm looking at in my current role. And then I was also interested in really looking at their initiatives around mental health. So my dissertation was in looking at mindfulness, student stress management, flourishing, and so that was really exciting to me. And what I loved about it, again, what I loved about the Fulbright is everything is again very structured. There's not a lot of thought in terms of preparation. So when I applied, I think I applied in a January or something. In the next couple months, you get a letter that says you were accepted or you were not, and in attached to that email, or and attached to when I went to Mexico, they actually mailed it to you. But in that email, you not only get the congratulations letter, but you also get a copy of your application and the points. So you are admitted based on like a point system. So they'll say you get a 10 out of 10 for your project description. You have an 8 out of 10 for the question around how you're going to implement your project, because maybe you're missing some, but it's very clearly laid out around what are things that really went well with your application, and then what are things that you might need to think about as you are traveling. We traveled throughout the entire island of Taiwan. We got a chance to, and another area that I was interested in, which was really impactful for me, is listening to and hearing from indigenous communities. So if if you know anything about what's happened in Taiwan and education reform, I would say, as in other areas of the world, and the indigenous population is actually looking at, where do I fit into this reform, and how can we make sure that our language, our culture, our experiences aren't forgotten. So it was really awesome to actually be in the same room with indigenous scholars talking about some of the work that they're doing, and thinking about how I can again connect it to what I was doing. And then I would say, in addition to that, I had the chance to just meet. We talked about, the name of this workshop was with the Making Connections, and for me, that is huge. I talked about traveling being a part of my well-being, and I believe when you look at research around flourishing and connections, making connections with people, building relationships, that is huge. And so I was so excited to meet a ton of people. I was especially excited to meet Black scholars who were actually either traveled with me as cohort members or who were in Taiwan doing work. I went to there was an event we went to a cultural event, and there was a scholar talking about Juneteenth in Taiwan and talking about that experience. And it was interesting because there were groups from indigenous groups who were like connecting with that history of African Americans in this country. And so I love the idea of this cross-cultural exchange. It just, as always, changes every time I participate. I always come back a new person. And again, as I said, I got a chance to meet with scholars and really connect. And many of the people that I was able to connect with from my cohort, we're still connected to this day. So I'm going to pause here for questions. I'm going to go to chat again. Any other? Sorry, I'm just pausing to see if we have any questions. Okay. So I would say for me, oh, someone have a question? No.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
just going to ask if it's okay for me to just say my question out loud.
Absolutely.
Sure. Awesome. So, hi, I'm Lindsay Andre. I'm a doctoral candidate at Syracuse University in counselor education. Um, One of my questions is related to, I guess, so you've spoken to doing the Fulbright-Hays program more than once. Is that is that an option once you are accepted, or is it that you have to go through a formal application process each time?
Oh, yes, great question. Yes, you do have to go through an application. Um, I would say that, like anything else, though, the second time you go through it, it is ridiculously easy. The Fulbright Hays does have a stipulation that just because again they want to make sure that they are creating opportunities for a wide range of individuals, that once you do a Fulbright, I believe it used to be 1 year, I think it's 2 years. You have to wait another 2 years to do a Fulbright for that particular program. So, but yeah, it is. I would say that, but they also do give you points if you've done that before. They're looking for, as I said, they're looking to create a diverse group. So they want some newbies, they want some veterans, they want people in the middle. So I did get extra points because I had participated in one, and I would say that some of the areas I was focusing on was actually very, very much replicated in that second that second application. So some of the things I kind of lifted, I changed around, and I looked at the different population, the needs, but it was very similar, and my points weren't deducted for that as well. So, so yeah, so you do have to apply each time. But again, I think the second time you do it, I believe that you get extra points if you've done one before. You can utilize stuff that you've done before in the application process, and but again, the stipulation is that again, I think you have to wait at least 2 years before you do another Fulbright Hays program. So
I just want to add on to that, Dr. Andre, soon to be Dr. Andre. One of the things you can think about, I decided not to do it for like ethical kind of reasons. That doesn't sound right. Let me say what I'm going to say and you figure out how I'm going to change it. So I think in some ways, if you have like a Fulbright, like I did the longer Fulbright, it makes you attractive to come and do the Hays because you can talk about how I spent a year, I started all these projects. I need to make four short trips back to South Africa to push my projects forward. So you can either do the full Fulbright and then you can come back and you can apply for the Hays. I don't know. Please don't quote me on this, but I'm not sure if you have to wait 2 years to do if you're going to use different platforms or different vehicles. I don't think that there's a waiting period. Yeah. And in some ways, you could say, hey, I already started this, so you know I'm already good for it. So you can give me the next one, give me the other one. But I decided Chris Marsh, did not want to do that. I was blessed to get the 1 year. I wanted other people to get Fulbrights. I didn't want to monopolize all the Fulbrights, although I know they're endless, and do two. But you can do that. Or maybe you could even do the Hays first, set up, go on 4 short trips, set things up, and then spend a year to really kind of like hit all those things that you want to do when you set up on the first 4 smaller trips. So there's something to think about. But I do believe because you're already in the system, you can probably really advocate better for yourself because you've already proven yourself because you're already in the system.
yes, excellent. Yes. Does that answer your question, Dr. Andre? Hopefully it does. Yeah, oh, sorry. Yep.
And I'm blushing because Dr. Andre feels so far, but so close at the same time. But thank you.
we're manifesting, girl. We know it's coming, so it might as well. It's already done. But yeah, so yes, the waiting period is not between programs, it is the same program. Like you couldn't, like if again, Dr. Marsh can absolutely do another Fulbright, but they probably would there's a waiting period before she does another. But as I mentioned from that list, and you'll get the slide, there are so many other programs that we haven't even touched that's under Fulbright. So you can actually do different programs depending on your need. Oh, sorry.
And I know a lot of people who have done used different mechanisms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say another great one, especially if you're like, you know what, I really want to travel with the team. And I'm working with a group of people, and we have this great idea. I've had people who've done the group Fulbright, and that is again completely different program. But again, it just all depends on your why, what you want to do. So I was just checking the chat.
We do have a question that says, do Fulbright participants bring their families with them? If you want to leave your family at home, you can, but yes, you can absolutely bring your family with you. And the Fulbright should, and I can't speak to this, I didn't come with a family, but the Fulbright should work with you to help you find schooling and stuff like that for your family. I don't know for partners, spouses, if they will find employment. I don't think they do that. But again, there's a set kind of budget. You can bring your children, you can bring your partner, but there's still going to be like a set budget. So you have to make sure that you all are able to survive and exist on that budget, within that budget.
Yes. The Fulbright-Hays, again, because it's such a tight program, you are not allowed to. You also, there's also this, I don't know if it's everyone, but the last two Fulbright-Hays I went on, again, it's very tight. So they ask you not to necessarily add additional things in country. Once the program is done, they're like, okay, the program ends and we want to make sure that you've gone home. For the Fulbright Taiwan, because there was a lot of things, I got into it right before COVID and they extended the time because of COVID. They did allow us to arrive early into country, and that could be worked out with them. You might have to pay for some of that, or they will work it out with the hotel piece about that. But just, yeah, the family is everyone who does the Fulbright-Hays has to apply for the Fulbright-Hays, so you cannot bring family with that. But again, it's a shorter amount of time, and again, it's a really, really tight schedule. Like there were times for Fulbright-Hays where we're up at like at 8 and we didn't get back to our hotel until 7. So it's a tighter schedule. All right, let me go. What time? Ooh, okay. So a couple of my colleagues, unfortunately, were not able to make it. As I mentioned, I went with a cohort who was doing just some amazing things. But hopefully at another session, another time, if we do this again, they'll be able to share. But as I talked about, I think the thing for me around travel is really this opportunity of well-being, of exploration, but I cannot highlight the connections that you make. And Dr. Marsh talked about that a lot in her experience about just meeting with other scholars or just meeting with people in general. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about this experience is that on one hand, you'll notice the differences, right? You're traveling, you're exploring a different culture. But what also always strikes me is the similarities. It was interesting when I went to Mexico I think it was 2011, 2012, and then I went to Taiwan, and we were in both areas because I did the Fulbright-Hays seminar. We connected with high school teachers and professors, and we were all complaining about the same thing. We were like, oh, we're all struggling with this in the classroom, we're struggling with this. And it was just a wonderful opportunity to actually build this camaraderie ship. And many of these people, again, I'm still connected with to this day. So
I wanted to add something real quick. So there was a question, someone made a comment about being a single parent and wanting to show their children the world. And I agree wholeheartedly, applaud you for that. One of the things I just want you to kind of think about, and you just have to work it out. And I appreciate the Fulbright because they give you kind of enough warning to kind of set everything up for schools and stuff like that. But like in South Africa and probably a lot of the world, except for America, their school year starts on the calendar year. Don't ask me why in America ours starts in August and goes through like June. Makes zero sense. Most schools start in January. So just take that in mind when you're trying to kind of think about your children, that you want to make sure that your schools here in America know that they're going to be in another country and it's going to start in the calendar year. So it's going to take a little bit of disconnect there. But if you work with the school and work with your host country, they'll make sure that the child doesn't miss out. It's an easy transition going from one school system or one calendar system to another system. And the other thing I wanted to say as well is that I applaud Dr. Brian for putting these beautiful slides together. I didn't read over this. I didn't add my stuff like I was supposed to before we started talking today. But I do have a lot of pictures about South Africa. If you follow me on any of my social media posts and go down to 2017, I was in South Africa 2017. I was actually there this year. I think I've gone every year, met beautiful people, and I go back as often as I can. But if you want to really, I tried to chronicle my experience when I was in South Africa. So if you follow me on social media, scroll down to 2017. That's the year I was in the country. You'll see some of my work. And my social media is Dr. Chris Marsh, DrKrisMarsh, Dr. Chris Marsh. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and what's that other one?
LinkedIn.
Twitter for now. I'm not sure how much longer I'm gonna be on Twitter. But yeah, I just try to kind of chronicle some of my experiences. So you can go there and see some of the stuff.
Yes, and actually that is the one slide that I forgot. How can you follow us next time?
I'll put it on there.
Yes, yes, please do that. So we're kind of I just have one more slide. But I wanted to, I hate to say conclusion because it's not a conclusion, but this is, as I said, a lot of the information we provided today was, we tried to talk about our experience, but some of it as it pertains to the nitty and gritty details of individual programs, those are things that you're going to have to continue to look into. And so we kind of were surface level. But as you're thinking about, if you are interested or if you want to explore more, I kind of put together some questions that you might want to, again, be thinking about. Why apply for the Fulbright? Again, for me, the biggest part is like, what is your why? It absolutely looks great on your resume, on your CV. Yes, but again, there are, and that is a valid reason to do this, especially depending on where you want to go. But there are, again, as I said, some other reasons as well. To me, a big part of this is definitely the connections that you make, and it is long lasting. You hear Dr. Marsh say that she visits every year. Again, one of my cohort members, Dr. Chabelle Hall, she has built a relationship. She actually built a relationship prior because of connection with her school, but she goes back every year as well. And so I think that's really important. And thinking about the value, life changing, absolutely life changing. And again, it can pertain to what you're doing for your life's work, whether it's scholarship related or other things. I think there are so many elements to the Fulbright experience that for me, it's been life changing, and I'm already excited about applying to another one. The reason why I can't go to Colombia is because my summer is going to be a little crazy, but I might consider doing another program, but I really have enjoyed the Fulbright the Hays program. And then again, be thinking about, as Dr. Marsh mentioned, not only your own personal reason for perhaps this particular program, the particular country and activity that you're doing, but also how can your work, the work that you want to do, ultimately contribute to Fulbright's overall mission. And remember, I said there's definitely been, again, more push, like in many areas, to DEIA. And so if there are things that you want to do around that, believe me, you're going to get extra points for that on your application. So that might be something to think about, especially if you're in the area. And then I would say for the application process, how do you begin? Just begin. Just begin. So if I was thinking about it, and I might do it. I might put it on my LinkedIn account. But if you are interested, you could always contact me via LinkedIn or any of the social media that I'm on. And it's just Trina Bryant. And I can give you a copy of a graded application. So as I said before, at least for the Fulbright-Hays, when they return if you get accepted, or if you don't, they send you back a copy of your application, and they have points attached to it, and they give notes. So they say, oh, this was great, but we want more of this, or this was great. So one of my notes was, I love to do everything. I was like, I'm going to do all this stuff when I get into a country. And they were like, you're there for a month. You need to, this is still good, but you need to kind of make your focus a little bit more concrete. So just begin, reach out to us. As I mentioned, the links that I have that's in the slide, I would say they're super responsive to you. So as I've been working with like Matt Robinson and the Fulbright-Hays, I email, he usually gets back within 24 to 48 hours. And so they really want Fulbright to continue to succeed, and they want to create opportunities for my diverse group of individuals. And so I would say they're very responsive. And then I'll say the last two things is like, start brainstorming, especially if you're not doing the Fulbright USA. You have some time. The cycle doesn't begin until April 2024. If Fulbright-Hays, unfortunately, the application is due a little bit sooner, the 4th of January. But start really thinking about your why. And I would say reaching out to potential references. You'll need at least 2. And I think sometimes that could be a delay just because people are so busy, especially if you're in education. So those are the steps that I would start with. Dr. Marsh, do you want to talk a little about
So not trying to brag, but I share my application with other people. I've shared it with people, and of the people that I've shared it with, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 other people have gotten Fulbright applications. I'm not saying this because gotten Fulbrights. I'm not saying it's because of my application, but I have no problem sharing. Some people don't want to share the information, and I'm not that kind of person. I gave you my email address, I gave you my cell phone number, I gave you my social media handles. If you reach out to me and ask me for the application, I will share it with you. I have no problems whatsoever. There's also like Fulbright is a well-oiled machine. It is, but even with the well-oiled machine, there will be some hiccups, some hiccups along the way. For example, when I was trying to get my visa in South Africa, I was just about to leave. I had to have a visa, a work visa. I was a week or so from leaving, and my visa still was not in place. I cried and cried and cried, but I was like, oh, the devil is alive. There's no way that they're not going to let me get to South Africa. So by hook or by crook, I got that visa and I was in South Africa. Fulbright had other Fulbright scholars that were going to South Africa. They were having the same problems that I had with the visa. I literally, with 3 other people, we went down to DC. One came from New York to stay with me, went down to DC. Had to go through this. We had to like go through a gas station, through an alley to get to this place to get some notary for us to get our visas. So Fulbright is a well-oiled machine, but there are like little hiccups that will happen along the way. But the beautiful thing about Fulbright, again, because it is a well-oiled machine, you will have a intimate connection with those who have been in this country you're going to, and they can help you with some of the things that you need to think about as you're thinking about, because you have to get like health insurance. You're like, okay, what health insurance should I get? I called the people behind me and I was like, what health insurance did you get? They're like, we got this, this, and this. I was like, did you rent a car or did you buy a car? And they're like, rent a car. Here's where we rented the car. So anything that you think you might possibly need, there's somebody who's already done it. Fulbright has access to them and they can help you walk through the process as well. So please be sure to use Fulbright as much as you possibly can if and when you get your award.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Any other questions? I'm trying to go through the chat. No, I think I missed. Feel free also to, as I said, we're coming to a close, but if you prefer to actually just speak your question or comments, please feel free. Oh, Merlinda, yes. Merlinda, yes.
Yes, thank you. I know we've been on this call for a while, but I did arrive late. Can you explain the difference between Fulbright and Fulbright-Hays? I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay.
And I see your face, you paused and you said, really, all this time? I know. I'm so sorry.
I will work with Dr. Taylor to make sure you get a copy of, hopefully maybe within 24 or 48 hours, I don't know, of the slide. So that information is there. Just very, very, very briefly, actually, if I had my teacher's hat, I would ask the class, can someone explain, but I'll mention Fulbright's U.S. Scholar is a little, this is how I simplify it. It is generally a longer period of time that you're participating in this program. It's a little bit more, I would argue that can be a little bit more intense. And it's a little bit more you bringing your expertise and how you want this program to go, in terms of you have to be thinking about your itinerary and all that jazz. The Fulbright-Hays is generally, and by the way, you have to have an advanced degree. Now, for the Fulbright-Hays, you do not necessarily have to have an advanced degree. It was designed primarily to impact what's happening in the classroom. So they're primarily looking for practitioners, and individuals could be secondary, elementary ed teachers, college administrators, and it's a shorter amount of time, very short, like we're talking about a month, maybe in an extra week, and everything is lined out for you. It's a very, very tight schedule. So, and when I mean tight, at least in Taiwan, it was very tight. Like we had maybe 1 or 2 days where we could just go off, but everything is accounted for and who you meet with. So it's, again, it depends on what you want, but there's a lot of nuances in that, but that's the general thing. So if you can't go away for 9 to 12 months and you're like, I want to still experience a Fulbright, then and I don't have time to think about all the different things with this project, then the Fulbright-Hays is for you. Even the project deliverables are very clear. We get a template of how we have to fit our project into this template, and that's it. So if you're someone that's like, I don't like templates, then you might not like a Fulbright-Hays, but that's the generic difference. Again, there are a lot of nuances within that. Thank you for joining us, though. Any other questions? And feel free.
Yes, Dr. Bryant, I have a question
Yes.
for you. It's regarding the Fulbright-Hays, the seminar. experience. I'm wondering if I know you said it's a little bit broader. So, for example, I have experience basically working in corporate America. So, just received my PhD last May. I do not have experience with teaching.
Whoa. Did you say you received your PhD last night?
In May, no, last May.
Oh,
In May.
Yeah, last
I was
May.
like, well, congratulations.
I was like,
Yay, welcome to the club.
Thank you. I'm wondering if I would qualify though to perhaps apply for the seminar. I'm interested in that because it would just like aligned with my schedule a little bit better. But are they only looking for professors or students? Because again, I work in corporate America. I don't have experience as a professor or anything like that.
right. Does the work that you do impact education? Just curious.
It does, yeah. So it
Okay.
ties in.
Okay.
But it's more like tech. So I work for Microsoft and I
Okay.
actually work with schools to incorporate our software into their different programs, various universities.
Yes. Okay. So I would say so. Two things. Number one, so I'm going back because I remember for those of you who've been on the call for since closer to the beginning, you'll notice I mentioned I'm going back to this slide. I'm trying to limit the boxes on my screen. That there are so many programs. We just touched upon two. So I would say if you wanted to do a Fulbright-Hays, I would for your application process. You might reach out to the one of the people running that program, and as I said, you can look at the link that I sent, and you might want to explain and say, hey, my work does touch higher ed or secondary ed or whatever, and this is why I would like to go. This is why it would make sense for me and how I could impact not only Fulbright but impact the work that I do. So I think that's one approach. Again, the Fulbright-Hays primarily, though, are looking for people in that education, but they are looking for administrators as well. And so I think there's something to be said about how you express why you would be a value add to this particular cohort that's going, right? So that's number one. But number two, and this is me not knowing a ton about all the other programs. If you look at on the box, the second box from the I guess from my left, there are Fulbright has also been committed to really creating opportunity for, I guess, scholars and professionals who are in a particular industry. So you might want to look at some of these. So maybe a Fulbright specialist program, maybe that's for you. And I can't quite remember. I think the Fulbright specialist program, you might be able to, I don't know if it's as structured, but I don't believe it's as long as, for example, the doctoral dissertation one or the U.S. Scholar one. You also might want to, I'm trying to think of the other one that I was looking at the other day. As it pertains to higher ed, so they have the Fulbright Specialist Program is under both. Yeah, so I think you would have to think about how this can impact not only again the Fulbright but your experience. So I think there's opportunities to explore there. I know that's perhaps not the best answer, but I wonder again, because your work touches higher ed, if you might be able to fit into either the specialist program or possibly the Fulbright-Hays program. But I don't know, Dr. Marsh, I don't know if you have any other insight into that.
No, I don't have a really good answer. I do think that for the most part, I believe if you call the Fulbright and kind of let them know what you're thinking about, and they're really good about responding. You can email them or call them. They're pretty good about getting back to you. Like, you might want to look at these mechanisms or these platforms or these vehicles. So I would, if you're not sure, I would email them and have them give you some input on what would be the best way to go.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And congratulations again, Dr. Grace.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. So I have, please feel free to raise your hand, but I also have let's see, I earned a PhD, I wish to re-enter academic work. Would Fulbright be useful for this? Do you want to take that, Dr. Marsh? I don't know.
I'm not, okay, so 2008, that's the same year I started at the University of Maryland. That's about 15 years from now. I don't know if the Fulbright is the most useful for you to re-enter academic work. I don't think so. I do think that you might want to attach yourself with the institution for a couple of years and then apply for a Fulbright. I highly recommend that you do apply for a Fulbright, but I don't think that that should be your entree back into academic space. But that's just Chris Marsh speaking. Fulbright may have a totally different perspective. But given the year you got your PhD, and it sounds like maybe you haven't been in the academic market, it may be a little more challenging for them to see what you might do in another country. Because I'm like I said earlier, you really want to make sure you establish a clear agenda of what you want to do, and before you apply for the Fulbright, and that can help you with your application. And so maybe to really get a full idea of what you want to do, maybe have an association with institutions, an academic institution might help get you there first before you apply for the Fulbright.
Absolutely. Great. Any other questions? And feel free. I don't have multiple screens open, so if I don't see your hand up, feel free to unmute it. And,
We might be able to stop sharing your screen.
yes, let me do that. Okay, that would be great.
Could either or both of you share more about the projects that you completed? I know you talked about your experience, but I'd love to hear about the projects themselves.
Yes. Do you want to? Well, I can start, and then maybe Dr. Marsh, you can talk more about your amazing work. So, as I mentioned, I'm an administrator at a small liberal arts college. I help manage our first year writing program, and I'm a part of like multiple committees. At one point, I was part of a curriculum committee, and so and then when I was doing secondary ed, when I did my first Fulbright-Hays to Mexico, I had a leadership role at a small charter school, not mid-level role, and my role was a humanities teacher, so working with students and working with administrators to think about the classroom, and they were committed again to social justice work and really creating more inclusive curriculum. So with that preface, both of my programs have been about really thinking about the curriculum that we teach and enhancing it. For my most recent Fulbright-Hays, because my dissertation, I finished my dissertation last year, September, and my research has focused on, again, mental health for students transitioning to college, so that transition period, flourishing, mindfulness. And so when part of my application and in talking during the pre-departure, I said, I'm really interested in talking to educators who are either helping to design and integrate curriculum that deals with stress management. I'm also interested to see what Taiwan and what certain schools in certain school districts in Taiwan are doing to support mental health. So for my project, and I actually have to turn it in, I have to do my final, I did my draft already, but I have to turn my final say by midnight. So yay, today. I created a 4-unit, 4-session kind of project where it helps students practice mindfulness. It helps students talk about stress in a healthy way, and it helps them kind of problem solve how are they going to manage stress in their lives. And my goal was that I would create this. I have created this project. I've also spoken with a couple of the scholars that I met in Taiwan, and I've asked them for their input about what makes sense, so that there's some, it could be hopefully culturally appropriate. And I'm using the flourishing scale and the perceived stress scale, and both of them have translations for both English and Mandarin. And I have people, my project is that students in a first year program will be tested in the beginning, and they'll go through the 4 sessions, and then they'll be tested at the end of the semester. And the goal is that these sessions can be integrated into classroom, and they're like literally 10-minute sessions. So my argument is that by integrating 10-minute sessions, whether it's a mindfulness activity, whether it's a brief conversation, a check-in around how are you feeling, and helping students talk about how to deal with stress, that we can decrease stress levels and increase flourishing levels. And those will be caught with the flourishing scale and the perceived stress scale. So that's what I'm doing. And I think it wound up being, because we're using, for those of us that were in the classroom, we're using Understanding by Design, Dr. Teague's work. So it's a template, and we have to put it in the template again, which is very easy. It's not a lot of thought in terms of how do I organize this? It fits into the template. But I think my project right now is about 15 pages, and I'm just going to do an edit, and I'm going to submit it by midnight tonight. So that's my project. For the project for Mexico, I designed a unit that explored indigenous populations in certain areas like Puebla, San Cristobal, and other areas in Mexico to teach the kids. So that was my project. Dr. Marsh.
For my project, I wanted to look at people that were in the Black middle class. I kind of mentioned this earlier. When we think about the Black middle class in when we think about South Africa, we think about HIV, famine, AIDS, and apartheid. We do not think about a thriving Black middle class. So I really wanted to put the Black middle class on the map, both in the US and in South Africa, and have us think more nuancedly about when we say Black South Africans, who exactly are we really talking about? So I decided before I even got there with my Fulbright, I did a longer Fulbright, and I could teach if I wanted to, or I could just do research. And I said that I only wanted to do research. I would not have had enough time to put together an entire class. I did have multiple opportunities to lecture at the university level about the research that I was doing. And so when I was there, we collected about 90 something interviews with people that identified as Black middle class. The other thing too is that there's townships in South Africa, and a lot of Black folks that were middle class stayed in these townships. But we wanted to look at the identity and like the processes of those who moved outside of the townships and tried to move into more integrated kind of like suburban areas and what that actually kind of looked like. And a lot of the researchers always talks about Black middle class in townships, and we wanted to expand that conversation. So we interviewed about 90 people or so. To date, we put a proposal together with the South African press. We wrote a couple of chapters and a book proposal, and they said they really liked the idea, but they want to see the whole book manuscript. Now that was probably 2019, 2020. I'm not really sure when it was, but I wrote another book. Now that I finished that book, I'm either going to pivot and work on my South Africa book, or I'm going to pivot and work on a book around golf, because I just started golfing, and there's a whole race, sex, class component to that, and I really want to talk through that. So I'm probably going to pick the book up, if not this year, probably next year, and hopefully we'll try to get it out before 25 or 26 at the absolute latest. Like I said earlier, again, it's really important for me that I publish the book in the country that I was in. I do not want to publish it in America because that feels exploitive, and I do not want to do that. To the question about the projects that are created, who retains, because you put IP, I think that means intellectual property, not really sure, but if you mean intellectual property, not sure, I admit, I don't even know what it means, but I don't really know. I think that's what it means. I was trying to hurry up and Google it, like, what does IP mean?
You're right.
If I'm not mistaken, so I do not know. I honestly don't have the answer to that question. I believe you retain intellectual property. I don't believe the Fulbright has anything to do with that. Now, you would be a disservice to Fulbright if you did not acknowledge them, that they helped fund your experience to create whatever you created. But I do believe that you retain intellectual property.
Yes, I believe that's what I came across as well. As for the Fulbright-Hays, the project, they do ask you to share that. They have a portal which you share, so I have to drop myself into a portal, but you still, just because they during, especially when they have their anniversary celebrations, they highlight, you might open up a document. If those of you who are going to look into more, you'll open up some of the documents and they'll kind of highlight, so and so did this amazing project, and they might have a snippet of your project. To find more about her project, click here, to kind of give you examples. But you are absolutely, you still own what you have brought to the table. And my stuff is an extension of my dissertation, which is part of it's already published anyway, so I do own that. But yes, for the Fulbright-Hays, you do have to submit your curriculum project using the template, and you have to put it in the portal. But what I was told, and this is from my context there, is that it's an opportunity for them to keep track of what's being done. So someone had asked earlier, how do they know if your project isn't a repeat of something else, so they know what's being done, but also to celebrate and to use for promotional things. Like if you wrote for me, I also had to write a reflection paper, for example, and one of my cohort members, a snippet of their reflection paper is in one of their promotional stuff. So
one of the beautiful things about the Fulbright is their network. And so we don't have a portal that I have to, first of all, I didn't have to, like, if I remember correctly, I didn't have to do a final report. And if I did, it was like half paragraph, like here, I don't remember having to do that. I do not. And if I did, I promise you it was a half a paragraph. Because again, they only wanted me to do 33% of what I said I was going to do, because I knew it wasn't realistic. And you only have a year. So it was a very short report. But the beauty about the Fulbright is their network and their strong network. So hopefully you would be willing to share what you did with people that are coming behind you. That's what keeps the network strong and keeps the network going. If you're one of those people that's real cagey and don't want to share your work, I don't even think the Fulbright will really be for you, because you want to draw from people that have done before you and be able to pass that information on to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think because the Fulbright-Hays is really about the goal is to impact the classroom. So they want you to be able to help other people who are impacting the classroom. So that's why there's this pressure. And again, and also that's why there's it's a very, very clear structure. Another example of the difference is a very clear structure of what they want, so that all lesson plans, curriculum projects, there's a similar format. And so a teacher could look at it and be like, oh, I could do that. Or an administrator could look at that and say, I could do that. And I would also say for me, for both programs that I was in, like I think it was like maybe the last week of the program, we actually had to share with our cohort. We had to do like a presentation, and but again, it's very much like the classroom experience. So if you want that, if you need that really tight structure, then maybe that's for you. If not, then it's like there's so many other projects that I would encourage you to do. I might try the Fulbright U.S. Scholar because that sounds awesome. And follow Dr. Marsh. But yeah, so there are so many other things that you can do, so many other programs, but these are just the two that we did. Any other questions? When we were planning this, we were like, do we need an hour? 2 hours? So we kind of gave us 2 hours, and I'm happy we did, because it looks like we spilled over. So we don't have to necessarily go for the practice of sorry, I'm looking at the practice of fostering collaboration makes sense. I can see how this benefits but knowledge and uplift scholarship. Yes, absolutely. And I will say the two Fulbright seminars, the seminars that I went on, the first one, I was literally the only one that looked like me. And then the next one, there were I think there were 3 or 4 other individuals. But what was so amazing is that, and this is maybe just the experience of certain people, I would say, is that when I saw people who look like me, it was like, oh, and those are the people that I've also connected with, and we still remain in contact to this day. And so I think Fulbright is for everyone. I'm excited about their focus on DEIA, but I would say, as Dr. Marsh mentioned, it is so awesome and exciting to see more and more people who look like us taking advantage of this opportunity, sharing their expertise, and really spreading, learning, growing, and sharing their knowledge. So I would encourage you to do it. And if this is not the time for you, or not, you're just not in that space, then please take this knowledge and share with others, share with students. As I said, there's student programs, there's stuff for international students, there's stuff for almost everyone. And so share that, and hopefully, we can continue to grow and learn which is what Fulbright intended, even though, I know there are some concerns about the father of Fulbright.
And the conversation doesn't stop here. It just actually starts here. If you need us, we're always here and a resource and available for you. And to the question about mentoring, Dr. Andre, I've already liked you or followed you on Instagram. So yeah, you're kind of stuck with me, kid. So if you need anything, you got me. So just let me know. Just let me know.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions or comments? I said you can email us.
19 minutes back. Yes.
I know. I know some people have their cameras off for a reason, but if you don't mind, then I definitely want to take a picture, because that's how I do. So if you want to be a part of the picture, if not, that's fine. I'll just take a picture with me, myself and Dr. Marsh. But if you would like to be a part, please.
Yeah, ready for my picture, like what?
Okay, you're good. Oh, this thing's popped up. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to take a couple. And then I'm going to also take one with my computer. Hold on. All right. Done.
Thank you. Will you please tag me?
Yes, I will. And I also want to say, I took off my thank you slide, but I just want to give a huge shout out to the Black Doctoral Network. and under Dr. Taylor's leadership. I know this is not a whole testimony, but I would say that I joined the doctoral network when I was starting my doctoral journey, and there were times where I was like, I'm not about this life. I'm about to give up. This this network has really helped me practice my presentation skills, but I also love the way that this network really brings scholars together and to share knowledge. And so a huge thank you. And this was put together super last minute, so I think, Dr. Taylor was like, I'm about to be out, Trina. Why are you emailing me? But I appreciate her. And likewise, Dr. Marsh, I'm so impressed and so inspired by your scholarship. And I'm really excited for the work that you're going to be continuing to do, your publication. And I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you so much for joining us.